will call to order the April 11th meeting of the Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District and the Sacramento Area Sewer District. Would the clerk please call the roll to establish a quorum?
Yes, good morning. Directors Bruins, Carr, Frost,
Here.
Guerra, Harris,
Here.
Hume,
Here.
Lee, McGarvey, Morin,
Here.
Natoli,
Here.
Orozco,
Here.
Peters, Cerna,
Here.
Villegas,
Here.
Warren, Kennedy,
Here.
and you have a quorum.
Thank you.
This meeting of the Sacramento Regional County Sanitation and Sacramento Area Sewer Districts is being broadcast live on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast, Consolidated Communications, and AT&T Uverse cable systems. The meeting is closed captioned for our hearing impaired viewers and webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. Today's meeting will replay Sunday, April 15th at 6 p.m. on Channel 14. In accordance with Government Code 54952.3, compensation for the meeting of these legislative bodies is required to be verbally disclosed. The amount of $100 will be paid for each member participating today as a member of the Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District, and the amount of $100 will be paid for each board member participating today as a member of the Sacramento Area Sewer District. Compensation for Sacramento County supervisors and the City of Sacramento council members is paid to the county and city respectively to partially offset those costs of those governments. The compensation for other board members is delivered to the individuals. Members of the audience wishing to address the board should fill out a speaker identification form located at the back of chambers and hand it to the clerk. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the board and state your name for the record. Please silence your electronic devices at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item.
Okay. Acting as Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District, your district consent matters are items 1 through 7.
Are there any questions? Anybody like something pulled from consent?
Move consent.
Second. Okay, moved by Director Harris, second by Director Hume. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Next item.
Okay, item number 8, comments from the public on issues not on the posted agenda.
I have no speaker slips. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on an item not on the agenda? Item.
Okay. Acting as Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District, your district separate matter, item number 9, award of the contract for the Echo Water Project Tertiary Treatment Facilities Project.
Thank you. We'll hear from staff in a minute. The way this is going to work is staff will present, Prabhakar will present, and then we'll allow the protesting party 10 minutes. We will then allow the low bidder 10 minutes. We'll take public comment if there is any, and then we'll have an opportunity for board questions and deliberation. Prabhakar.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. We would need a couple of minutes. It's shown as 5 minutes. I think it would probably make about 7 or 8 minutes. I'll take about half the time, and the council will add some things. Tertiary Treatment Facility, or the TTF, is part of the Echo Water Project, and it's required to be built by May 2023. To get ready for this project, Regional San pre-qualified contractors, general contractors, and we got 5 pre-qualified contractors. One of them decided not to bid, and 2 of the remaining 4 formed a joint venture. So we received 3 bids on February 28th, 2018. The bids were, the lowest bid was from Balfour Beatty Infrastructure Incorporated at around $299 million, with an engineer's estimate of $372 million for the project. The low bid was roughly $35 million, or the next 2 bids are $35 million to $57 million more than the low bid. That's how the bids came in. The highest bidder protested the low 2 bids. The low bid on 2 counts: incorrect use of incorrect bid form, and not listing a proper instrumentation and control subcontractor. And the highest bidder also protested the second low bid for not properly listing the instrumentation and control subcontractor. Regional Sand Council found both of those claims to be without merit, and she'll discuss that in a moment here. Your options today are you have 3 options today. to accept the staff recommendation to award to Balfour Beatty Incorporated, the lowest responsible bidder, direct staff to rebid, or award to somebody that's not a low bidder, but at a later date, because if you make the decision, you have to give time for a disappointed bidder to an opportunity to protest. It's important that your board adopt staff's recommendation to ensure that this project is built in time so that we meet the compliance dates. And it is highly likely, if the rebid is done, that we will not be able to meet the compliance dates. Remember, I said we have to meet it by May 2023. The failure to meet the compliance dates have regulatory consequences. The regional board can impose fines up to $10,000 a day, plus $10 of every gallon of water that is non-compliant by the time that we were supposed to be compliant. It is at their discretion. So as you could quickly add up, we discharge roughly 100 to 120 million gallons a day. Fines could be in millions. Again, it's at their discretion. Rebid also carries risks. As I mentioned, there are only 3 pre-qualified bidders that bid. There's a 4th one that may choose to bid. And we have, if we want additional bidders to come in for the rebid, we really have to open the pre-qualification process again. And then also the rebid, if you allow for only these 3 parties to rebid, they know what the bids are today. It's very difficult. You just don't know where the bids will come. There's that uncertainty there. And on top of it, there's a construction costs that are escalating, so you don't know what kind of bids you will receive based on that aspect also. The one point that I wanted to also address is some have suggested that because there's a huge difference between the high bid and the low bid, for somehow a low bid may be not a good bid. And we have no reason to believe, and the low bidder has confirmed that it is a good bid. Just to give you a reference, 2 years ago, your board awarded a BNR project to Dragados, who submitted a bid of $414 million, where the engineer's estimate was roughly $504 million. So the difference at the time between the engineer's estimate and the low bid was $89 million. The difference between the highest bidder and the bid for Balfour Beatty was, or Dragados, was $124 million at the time. We didn't question at the time whether the bid was sound, and we know for a fact within the last 2 years working with the Dragados, the bid was good, and they have done well. So we have no reasons to suspect that to be the case here. In terms of, if you decide to award to somebody other than the low bidder, then it will obviously increase the cost by tens of millions. As I said, the next low bid is $35 million more than the low bidder, and the highest bidder is $57 million more than the low bidder. So that's a cost escalation. So what our recommendation is to award the project to the lowest responsible bidder. That's, in our view, is Balfour Beatty. And I'm going to have the council elaborate on why the protest is without the merit.
Thanks, Prabhakar. As you all have hopefully had a chance to review the memorandum that I submitted to you last Friday, there are actually 3 grounds that that Dragados has raised in the bid protest. As Prabhakar said, the first is the failure to use the correct bid form. Balfour Beatty used a bid form that was contained in Addendum 4, not the bid form that was contained in Addendum 5. However, Balfour Beatty did acknowledge all 5 addendums, and the price of its bid includes the $200,000 allowance, which is contained in Addendum 5. So the board should award to the lowest responsive bidder. That's what the law requires. There's a presumption that the low bidder should, in the law, that the low bidder should receive the award unless the bid is found non-responsive. So the question here is whether the bid is non-responsive, and if so, if that non-responsiveness is material. So as my memorandum lays out in further detail, our determination is that the error is not a material error. It did not affect the price of the overall bid. It did not give Balfour Beatty a competitive advantage at all, because as I said, the bid price includes the allowance of $200,000. Another key point in determining whether or not error is material or not is, would the bidder have been allowed to withdraw its bid based on the mistake in the bid? And in this case, our office concluded, again, that the error was not an error that would allow the bidder to withdraw its bid. The cases talk about whether or not the bid is as intended, and in this case, the bid is exactly what was intended. It included the $200,000 allowance in the total bid. Again, the courts do give substantial deference to the legislative body, to the awarding authority in making the determination. And in this case, I think that the board is justified in waiving the error that Balfour Beatty had in its bid. The second issue was regarding listing of a subcontractor. As you all know from prior bid protests, the law requires that a general contractor has to list a subcontractor that will be performing greater than 1/2% of the work on a project. And in this case, Dragados is arguing that Balfour Beatty and Kiewit both needed to list the instrumentation and controls subcontractor, but that is not the case. As I said, you have to list if it's more than 1/2%, and the instrumentation and controls work is not greater than that. And additionally, the instrumentation and controls subcontractor is actually a second-tier subcontractor, so that work is being done under a subcontract with Helix, which is the electrical subcontractor. Dragados is trying to argue that because the specifications require that an instrumentation subcontractor be pre-qualified, that it has to be listed under the law, and that's simply not the case. All that's required is that instrumentation subcontractor has to be from the pre-qualified list, and both Kiewit and Balfour Beatty intend on using a pre-qualified instrumentation and control subcontractor. So that issue is also without merit. The last issue that we haven't really touched on too much, because again, it's not really a strong legal argument, I don't think. Dragados is arguing that Kiewit and Balfour Beatty needed to list, or that their listed subcontractor, electrical subcontractor, will not be able to self-perform as required by the specifications. But again, that's something that's determined through the project, not through the bids. And Balfour Beatty and Kiewit have both confirmed that Helix will be able to meet that specification. So that argument is also without merit. So the board is definitely legally justified in rejecting the bid protest and awarding to Balfour Beatty.
Thank you, Director Cerna.
Thank you. A couple questions to start off with. I suspect there are going to be other directors that have questions as well of our executive officer and perhaps legal counsel. But the first question is, on a percentage basis, Prabhakar, when's the last time we saw such a big delta between first, second, and third bidders? In this case, it's measured in the tens of millions, which for me, always raises red flags. And I'm asking you on a percentage basis because obviously we don't have the prospect of awarding bids of this magnitude very frequently. And then the second question is, we're, 5 years away from the time that we need to hit our mark? So if it was the will of the board to consider going back out to bid, I'm trying to understand the schedule sensitivity when we're 5 years out, and I'm not sure how long it would take to rebid, but I can't imagine it's going to take years off, our ability to do that. It's probably measured in, I'm guessing, maybe in a couple months' time. So I need to understand that.
So the first point, in terms of the percentage basis, I haven't run the numbers. But I mean, in terms of this large magnitude projects, we had the BNR I was just referencing. The difference between the high and the low, granted there were, I believe, 8 bids. I'm pulling from my memory, so I may be incorrect, off by 1 or 2. 18%. From, or actually the difference between the engineer's estimate and the the low bidder, was 18%. In this case, it's 20%, not substantially different. In BNR's case, the difference between high bidder and low bidder was even more. It's probably, if I have to sit here and do the mental math, it's probably close to 22%, 21, 22%. But as I said, it's a $124 million difference between the high and the low. Now, as I said, a big chunk of the, so when you look at the bid form, there are different items that you have to break down. There's a big chunk is roughly, in Balfour's case, $200 million out of the $300 million bid. You got the electrical, roughly $62 million, and you got the iron, roughly $22 million, something like that. I'm just, again, throwing from my memory here. So it's difficult to ascertain what is included in the $200 million, and are there errors or things? And which I think is where we're going is, because there's a huge difference, is there error in assumptions how the bid was put together? We have no way to ascertain that because unless we open the bid, which there's no reason at this point to do that, and we have to rely on the contractor and the plans and specs where the contractor is expected to perform to the plans and specs. So based on that, I don't see a huge difference in what we experienced in the BNR side versus what we're experiencing today. But I can't quite remember what the separation in the, I believe there was I think Balfour Beatty was the protesting party in that instance. They were off by about $10 to $12 million is my recollection from the low bid at the time. Now, if you look at the first and the second bid, they're $35 million difference. So I can't really put exact correlation.
So I mean, what I'm considering here is that the protesting party, the third lowest bidder, is $60 million more, almost, than the low bidder. And so I'm trying to figure out, like I think you just referenced, well, are there certain items that are nested differently as to how they responded to certain parts of the bid,
project,
right? And at the same time, as I mentioned to our council in a one-on-one conversation with her yesterday, 2 days ago, I'm looking at this from the standpoint of if we go with a low bid, that's, in my opinion, that is significantly lower than the second and the third lowest bidders, can we expect that we're going to have proportionally more change orders? And do we set ourselves up to eventually perhaps pay as much as kind of the median bidder of the whatever it was, the 8 that submitted bids? So I'm trying to reconcile that.
Yeah, so it's a hard question to answer ahead of time. We have, as always, we believe our plans and specs are very clear. But that's not always the case when the execution starts. There's room for ambiguity, and then the change orders are presented, or the conditions change. All of those can happen. But we can only rely on the history. If we look at the BNR, which is bigger than this project, our change orders, granted we awarded to someone that's $100 million below, roughly $90 million below the engineer's estimate. Right. Our change orders have been very fair. We were able to, we can certainly apply inspection resources more judiciously so that we address the issues as they come up more proactively so that we can minimize these. I think we'll do that, and we have been doing that.
And so, if I can, what are the safeguards in place that govern or restrict a low bidder from going nuts with change orders later?
Change orders have to be, I'm going to ask council to weigh in, change orders have to be based on changed conditions or ambiguity in the specs or the drawings. That's usually where the change orders come from. There's always, usually there are two sides to those things. So that's how we come to the negotiated settlements in terms of where we would land. And in this project, we have not had too many of those where we couldn't agree. And where there was a disagreement, we ultimately were able to negotiate and get to the right spot where I think is the right place. So I don't see a reason why we wouldn't be able to do it in this case. I have no reason at this point to believe that we wouldn't be able to reach that outcome here. And I'm going to let the Balfour Beatty in their time address that too, and I'm looking to council. Did you want to say anything?
No, I mean, I agree that there are safeguards in the law and in the contracts and your procedures that will address negotiated change orders and when they're allowed and when they're not. So, I mean, and as Prabhakar said, the process has worked very well so far on the Echo Water project, and there's no reason to believe that it would not, continue the same. And then I think you didn't address the issue of...
Yeah, I'm going to address the second one. Yeah. So the second one is in terms of the timing. So if we decide to rebid this project, certainly it'll take some time to repackage the plans and specs, put it out on the street. Because we received the SRF funding, there's a minimum requirement in terms of how long you have to advertise and get those. So there's some requirements. You can't just quickly turn around. And so we're looking probably 4-ish months delay, 4 to 5 months delay in awarding the contract. But if we rebid and go through all the steps. Mind you, when we rebid, there's no guarantee that we won't be facing down the same issues that we're facing today. Somebody could be making a mistake, like what presumably a mistake is alleged to have been made today. So what that does is that we will lose a good construction season. The part of the project is we have to excavate. We have to build big concrete tanks. That is a key part of the project. So if we lose the excavation season, then we're talking excavating in the winter months with the unknown certainty as opposed to what the weather would hold like, and also pouring slabs in the winter. So we can pour walls, which we have experience doing with the project so far. We would really love to see the slabs poured during a good season, and then we can work the rest of the part. So that's where the delay is. Now, the schedule is very tight. Right now, we have roughly about 3 to 4 months float. So if we take that off in the front end, and the uncertainties that we're adding part of the winter construction season, we're assuming that there may be a delay, there's some loss in the winter because of the activities I just mentioned. It would put us roughly in a July 2023 timeframe. That's our estimate at this point. Again, many things can change in terms of what actually can happen and will happen, whether it's a big issue. So that's our estimate at this point. We would like to preserve as much float as possible because historically, especially with this project, we have implemented a number of projects. When we started out with some float at the beginning, just about every project, we ended up consuming that float, a good portion of it. And the filtration and the BNR projects are the two critical projects, which has regulatory deadlines, where some of the other projects, we could eat that because they're not in the critical path. We could afford to lose the time. For example, chemical conversion, we were delayed by a year, but it was not an issue. NSD, which is delayed probably close to a half a year or so because of the weather and the contract issues, but we could do that because it's not in a critical path. And I would really not be comfortable making the delays on this project knowingly this far ahead of time. That's my concern.
So I want to make sure I understand. If, let's say that there was no, let's say that we go back out to bid and it's a smooth process, right? There's no protest, there's no legal challenge. You're saying that that would consume the float?
Not only float, we would exceed that because of the loss of the construction season. Because we won't be as effective in the winter months doing the excavation and pouring the slabs. That's where I think we would be more than losing the float. We would have a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? All right, then at this time we will call the Dragados Flatiron representative to the podium. Reminding you, Mr. Avdis, you have 10 minutes.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Members of the board, Nick Avdis on behalf of the Thomas Law Group, representing Dragados Flatiron joint venture. Accompanying me today is representatives from Dragados, as well as Chris Morrow from the SMCD law firm that will provide some additional insights regarding some of the legal issues that were raised and some of the procedural ones as well. Generally, what I'd like to highlight for you, and before I hand it over to Chris to put a finer point on things, I'd like to focus your attention on a few things. You know, it's undisputed that there are ambiguities in the bid documents as they're currently set. You have 3 very sophisticated bidders, obviously, that completed the bid forms in 3 different and very different ways. The only response that precludes bid shopping is the Dragados Flatiron response. Dragados and Flatiron are acutely aware and understand of the importance of meeting the project schedule as alluded. I mean, certainly Dragados has done their share of the laboring ore to meet the project schedule and exceed expectations on the project itself to this point. But to award this next phase to a bidder that has a very strong misunderstanding of the project potentially also presents an opportunity to have extensive delays in any event. There is a lot of real estate between now and 2023 for project completion. On our team, we've discussed internally about potentially accommodating for the loss in time to, for example, rebid the project, and we think we could accommodate that and can still meet the project schedule. Third, for purposes of the bid submission, you have Dragados and Flatiron, who obviously, again, very sophisticated contractors who know the site, have the labor there now, can seamlessly transition to the next phase of the project quickly and efficiently, and more importantly, have a proven track record with Regional Sand. That's a very distinguishing feature from the phase 1 of the project bid. In this case, you have, and that's probably what I want to focus your attention to the most, is that Flatiron and Dragados had every opportunity to be the lowest bidder because of this advantage of being out on the site, understanding the conditions, understanding Regional Sand, and that to us is what's very much concerning about the Balfour Beatty bid, which is significantly lower. I will also note that for the phase 1 of the project, the top 3 bidders were within 6% of each other. I think that's also an important note. Again, I think what this does is it poses a significant risk of foreseeable claims against the district because of this unreasonably low bid. And obviously that underscores the strong possibility of delays. So with that, I want to pass it over to Chris Morrow, and I'll make some closing remarks after he's done. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to start off by saying that counsel for the district did accurately describe and summarize the legal issues that we believe exist with the 2 lower bids. Although we disagree with the conclusion, we understand the concerns that are raised by counsel, and we respect that. We look at it a little bit differently, and I think it's important to understand from the contractor's perspective why we view it differently and why that's important to the district. The legitimacy of the process and how the bids are handled and viewed by contractors is important to the district because it gives you the most accurate pricing. It draws more bidders to your jobs, which create more competition and better pricing as well. And so it's critical that the bid process be viewed in a consistent manner. And that has not happened here. We have 3 very sophisticated contractors that do work all over the United States and the world in instances, and they have viewed the listing requirements and the bid documents differently, materially differently. While we do not dispute that the listing of a second-tier subcontractor is not required under California law, it isn't. Only first-tier subcontractors whose value of their subcontract exceeds 0.5% are required to be listed. But if the bid documents impose that obligation on the bidders have to comply with that requirement. And that did not happen here. In the pre-qualification document, the district states that the general contractors using non-pre-qualified subcontractors on the bid advertising date will not be considered. You cannot look at Balfour and Kiewit's bid on the face of the bid only and determine who they are using for the instrumentation and control scope of work. That subcontractor had to be pre-qualified, and the entity performing the instrumentation and control scope of work has to perform 75% of that scope of work. In Balfour's situation, they listed Helix, which was a pre-qualified electrical contractor. They were not qualified to do the instrumentation and control scope of work. Nonetheless, Balfour listed them to do that work. That's not in compliance with the bid documents. It's not in compliance with how the bid documents were reviewed by my client, which clearly required pre-qualified contractors to be utilized on the job. And I don't think that aspect of the requirement to use pre-qualified contractors is at issue. What is concerning from our perspective is the ability now for Balfour and Kiewit to post-bid bid shop. And what that basically means is that they go to the various subcontractors and suppliers within these scopes of work, and they say, whoever gives me the lowest number, I'll take it. And I know that your bid may have been $12 million, but I want $8 million from you now. It's going to create situations of potential claims and litigation later on down the line. And bid shopping is disfavored by the law and by the state legislature. In the situation where, as here, we have a pre-qualified subcontractor to do the instrumentation and controls, this subcontractor, the two subcontractors at issue were both pre-qualified and went through a rigorous process prior to bid. The bidders all knew who we had to use. And in Dragados' instance, they listed Helix as the electrical subcontractor and then a separate entity for the instrumentation and controls. Both the bid amounts were identified on the bid form. Their contractor license numbers, their DIR numbers, the address, all of the information that you would typically see on a form was provided by the Flatiron Dragados JV. In both Kiewit and Balfour's bids, they did not include the instrumentation and controls amounts. Now, I will tell you that when we were talking about the difference and disparity in bids, what's interesting is that with respect to just the electrical instrumentation and control scope of work, the scope of work that's at issue really in our bid protest, the Flatiron Dragados JV was $10 million less for that scope of work than Balfour, and $12.8 million lower than Kiewit. So when we talk about the potential for claims and a misunderstanding of what this project requires, you can start right there. There's a $10 to $12 million difference just in that one scope of work alone. The Flatiron Dragados JV is well-versed in this market. It's, as many of you may know, there's an Oroville Dam repair project that's going on right now. And throughout the state of California, resources are being utilized to fix the dam in a timely manner. But it's impacting it's impacting labor, it's impacting materials, it's impacting trucking. And so there is an impact in this region, much like other regions, that are unique to this project. And it's important for the district to understand that getting a legitimate and well-vetted bid and bid amount is important, and to understand the impacts that Oroville Dam and other projects are having on our labor market regionally and on the ability to get materials and trucking. And if there is a disparity in the bids that is due to a misunderstanding with respect to the labor market, material costs, trucking costs that are unique to this region, it's not going to be a surprise if it later on results in additional claims and litigation that the district's going to have to deal with. So I want to turn it back over real quickly before we exceed our time limit.
Okay, just to wrap up, I appreciate your patience again. I think to underscore what Chris said, I think it's very important to have a fair and transparent process with everybody following the same rules. I think we can all agree on that. Projects of this magnitude are few and far between in our region. And certainly a process that's not transparent and really prioritizes the lowest bid above any other criteria and ignores the potential for, in this case I would characterize as gaming the systems. It really undermines what we've all agreed to in
Mr.
terms.
Abdus, so that you don't feel like you have to speak quite so quickly, I'm going to add a minute to both times. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Much appreciated. Again, abiding by the rules of the game that we've all agreed to play by. If we don't play by those rules, ultimately it doesn't serve the interest and it doesn't serve the ratepayers. I think ultimately what we're saying is that based on our broad experience, and I'm talking about two well-experienced contractors in the form of Flatiron and Dragados, each of which independently bid this before their JV and compared notes to submit the bid to the district. That's how they came up with their number. And so all we're saying is that probing questions need to be asked regarding the Balfour bid and the realistic impacts to the project schedule of rebidding this project. Certainly, rebidding is not a panacea, but it will maintain the integrity of the process by providing for an open and transparent process with everybody playing by the same rules. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, at this time, if the Balfour Beatty representative will approach, I will reset the clock. And I have added a minute.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'm Neil O'Donnell of Rogers Joseph O'Donnell, representing Balfour Beatty. The presentations this morning were very interesting when you compare them with the bid protests that you've seen. There's been a real shift in the presentation here from a focus on the legal issues. I'm going to address those in a moment, but they've essentially been almost conceded at this point. And rather, what the protester would have you believe is that there has been some basic breakdown in the competitive bidding process here. There is no indication that that's what's happened here. Rather, what's happened has been the competitive bidding system working exactly the way it's supposed to. You have a detailed set of specifications, a staff which has shown its ability to operate effectively with a detailed set of specifications in the BNR project, which is already underway. And you've gotten the advantage of competitive bidding by getting a sophisticated, highly qualified contractor who's able to do this work and is committed to do this work at a price which is advantageous to the district. Balfour Beatty, let me make clear, is completely comfortable with the proposal that it's made, with the bid that it's made. This is not a situation where it's depending on change orders. It would be foolish to do that with this set of specifications and a qualified staff to enforce the requirements of the contract and the specifications. And it's not bid shopping. It's committed. It has on file escrowed. It's in escrow its bid documents, which show, for example, who the instrumentation and control contractor is. What you have here is a situation where competitive bidding has given you a very effective price. Let me turn to, not only an effective price, but an assurance that you're going to be able to get this contract performed in the time that you need to get it performed. Let me turn to the legal issues that have been raised in the protest which brought us here today. I think the protester is still arguing that there's a material variation, a material problem with the Balfour Beatty bid because it used the bid form from Mod 4 rather than the bid form from Mod 5. Couldn't be clearer that that is an immaterial variation. This is a situation where Balfour Beatty put on its bid form a total price of $299,276,808. That can be explained only by adding in the $200,000 of the allowance that was included on Mod 5. So on the face of the bid itself, you can see what the bid amount is, and you can determine that that $200,000 allowance is there. There was no advantage to Balfour Beatty in using the Mod 4 form mistakenly because it acknowledged its obligations under all 5 of the modifications, which included the $200,000 allowance. And this is the epitome of an immaterial variation. there is a $57 million difference between the low bid and the high bid. $200,000 is about 0.3% of that difference. That can't possibly be a material explanation for what's going on here. It's simply not significant. Protester also argued, and I think they're still maintaining, that Balfour Beatty could have withdrawn its bid, but as counsel for the district has already indicated, the Public Contract Code, which deals with this, 5103, requires that there be a material, that the bid submitted be materially different than what the bidder intended in order for there to be an opportunity to withdraw. Well, there are two problems here with arguing that there was a bid mistake that would allow the bid to be withdrawn. One, the bid was exactly what Balfour Beatty intended, and two, the difference, if there was one, of $200,000, which there wasn't, certainly would not be material in a $300 million bid. Now to the question of the listing of subcontractors. I have to say I'm a little unclear at this point as to whether the protester is arguing that there's been a violation there or not. On the one hand, they suggest that they are conceding that Balfour Beatty and the district have complied with the requirements of the subcontractor listing law, but then they go back to arguing about bid shopping in a situation where the statutory requirements to deal with that problem are in the code, which they're apparently conceding has been met. But the fact is that what both the code and your specifications require is the contractor list a subcontractor for each portion of the work as defined by the contractor. The portion of the work defined by the contractor in this situation was electrical / instrumentation and control. Balfour Beatty listed a contractor for that, and by doing that, it met the requirements of both the Public Contract Code and of the specification of the subcontractor listing law and of the specification. And incidentally, that is precisely the approach that was taken by Dragados in its BNR bid. There's nothing wrong with that. It's appropriate. It meets the requirements of the specifications. And Balfour Beatty's escrowed bid documents will show that the district that it is committed to one of the listed instrumentation and control, qualified instrumentation and control subcontractors as the specifications require as a subcontractor. The staff has appropriately found that Balfour Beatty is a qualified bidder, responsive bidder entitled to this award. The Court of Appeal in the Gelato construction case that was cited by your counsel said an important thing that I'd ask you to keep in mind, and that is that protests based on claims of material deviations have to be evaluated on a practical rather than a hypothetical basis, considering the public interest, not the interest of the private entities. And it echoed some words from an earlier decision, which I want to take a moment to review. It said, "It certainly would amount to a disservice to the public if a losing bidder were to be permitted to comb through the bid proposal or license application of the low bidder after the fact and cancel the low bid on minor technicalities with the hope of securing acceptance of a higher bid. Such construction would be adverse to the best interests of the public and contrary to public policy." Those words apply directly here. There is no practical or legal reason that you should not accept a bid which would involve a significant cost savings to the district as a result of the NIDS, which have been pointed out in the protest that was filed by Flatiron, Dragados. So Balfour Beatty respectfully requests that you accept the recommendation of the staff and award this contract to it. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a somewhat unusual circumstance in which there's one public comment card who I believe has a secondary role in all of this. So if we do have board questions, but if the board would allow me, I'm going to ask that person to come forward because it may influence questions, and then we'll go to questions from the board. And that is Mr. Mark Bertolero.
Okay. Good morning. I'm here representing...
By the way, sir, I'm giving you 3 minutes.
I'm representing Kiewit. I'm here regarding the bid protest. Wanted you guys to look at a exhibit I have here. This is from our bid documents, and this is the listing that we used. Please look at column A. As you can see, Kiewit has listed the electrical / INC to communicate the scope was included.
I can't see that.
Maybe
Sorry, it was included with the Helix scope.
Blow your screen up to
Can you zoom in there?
Yeah, we're gonna put it on the overhead.
Okay.
It's also in their, I think it's an excerpt from their actual bid form, which is in your exhibits, but I don't know what exhibit it is.
exhibit?
I can find out, though.
I'm sorry, where is it?
It's the subcontractor listing for the Kiewit bid.
Oh, here, okay.
So I'll look for it while but this will be helpful.
So the listing is for electric is showing the slash with the INC. So this was included with our bid. The electrical included the INC. Kiewit listed Helix Electric's electrical subcontractor listing, which is under C here. You can see 983309, and then in column E, you can reference the DIR registration number 1 followed by 8 zeros 19, which Kiewit again used the slash to identify the pre-approved instrumentation and controls contractor that's performing the work, which is TSI. Kiewit wanted to ensure that anyone reading its bid would immediately understand that Kiewit was aware to use one of the pre-approved instrumentation contractors, which we clearly did. And the listed value, you can see there, that's in column B, for $62 million is accurate for the listed subcontractor Helix, and it includes TSI's scope for the cost as a second-tier sub, which is, as we spoke with earlier, in compliance with California code listing laws. So I wanted to make one point very clear with Kiewit's bid, is that we did not have any opportunity to bid shop as the highest bidder has represented, as Kiewit has clearly stated who we intended to use, TSI, for the instrumentation and controls. So this gave us no unfair bid advantage, whether it be $10 million, $12 million, whatever stated there, over any other bidder, as we disclosed in our original bid, the instrumentation and controls that we're using. The highest bidder seems to believe that the board is obligated here to ignore what it knows about the author of the solicitation requirement using the electrical and instrumentation controls contractors. Also suspend common sense here. I guess one example, if you used it, if I want to describe meters and seconds, if I had meters with a slash and second, that doesn't mean meters per second. Instead, they're saying it needs to be an or. So obviously, Kiewit's included the electrical with the instrumentation. Kiewit's bid is without question responsive, and it's the lowest bid that's free of any reasonable controversy in this case here. And Kiewit's also prepared to start work immediately if you elect to award the contract, it can deliver this contract on time. So with that, I would like to thank the board for their time today.
Thank you very much. Okay, at this point, we have board questions, probably of Balfour Beatty, I'm guessing, so we will start with, so you might want to approach, we'll start with Director Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I do have a question for a representative from Balfour, if you could answer something for me. So some interesting information was just brought forth by Kiewit. My question is, as I understand it, it was your intention to use TSI as the instrumentation and control subcontractor under Helix. First, is that correct? And second, was their bid included in the number given by Helix?
The answer is that Balfour Beatty was using the other qualified instrumentation and control subcontractor. That's reflected in its escrowed bid documents. That's the first part of the question.
Same one. Helix represented with TSI, they packaged up the deal. So we have the same combination.
So it is the same combination, I'm sorry. So it is TSI, and the further answer is that the price that's provided is the price for the subcontract to Helix, which includes TSI as the subcontractor. So it includes
That's
all
what
of the
I was
work.
asking.
Yes.
So in other words, you're not going to go out and look for an instrumentation and control subcontractor and put that out to bid, in other words, bid shopping?
That will not be done.
Okay. That's all I've got for now.
And I would just point out that Balfour Beatty also on their subcontractor form said electrical and instrumentation. So I could point that out to you, but I was just highlighting that. So it's similar to what Kiewit did as well. Even though I don't think it was necessarily legally required, they did that.
Director Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, sir. This is a question for Balfour Beatty representative. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I just had a question. You described Balfour Beatty as being a highly qualified contractor and having a highly qualified staff. But I'm wondering why in its oversight it failed to use the proper form. And in doing so, how does that inspire confidence in this board to want to do work with Balfour Beatty despite whether or not those errors are material or otherwise?
You know, that was a mistake. And sometimes mistakes are made, particularly in the rush of bid day on a construction project. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's a chaotic scene in which bids are coming in from all directions. And humans make mistakes, and this time a mistake was made. Balfour Beatty has a long record of performing major projects all over the country and doing it successfully. It's in the position to be able to be pre-qualified, to be a qualified bidder, a responsible bidder on those projects because of that demonstrated record of performance. And I would submit that while we all wish that hadn't happened that day, that minor paperwork issue should not give you any lack of confidence about the significant capability of this company, its ability to do this work.
Director Hume.
Thank you, Chair. My question is actually for staff, and I don't know whether to direct it to Ruben, Prabhakar, or to Vic, but I'm assuming that in reviewing the bids, each bid was judged for its completeness with respect to the different line items and the different contractors used. Was there any cross-referencing done between one bidder to another bidder to kind of find these discrepancies with the bid amounts? I mean, if the protesters' assertion is correct that $10 to $12 million was in one line item, you know, that's 20 to 35% of the delta of the low bid to the high bidders. Does that cause concern?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Vic to come up and answer that question. I don't recall that huge difference, although but he's in a better position.
So when we review the bids, we do look at all the components, and we've done a lot to try to streamline our bid form, so there's not a lot of different pieces in the bid. It's hard to tell what's included in those parts. The prime contractor can self-perform a lot of the work, so it depends what scope they've asked of their subs to perform. For example, electrical contractor will put in concrete duct bank work, includes excavation, rebar forming, concrete pouring. we don't say who has to do that work. That's really up to Prime and their subs on where that scope lies. So we did see that discrepancy, and we kind of look at that, what causes that big discrepancy, and a lot of times you just can't tell. It depends on what the scope of work was between the Prime and the subs.
And so when the Prime, if they self-perform, obviously they're not paying the subcontractors overhead and profit, and so they're able to realize some savings there, and given the magnitude of what that scope of work is, that would get passed through onto their bid?
Correct.
And so you feel confident then that Balfour's bid, as far as you can discern, picks up all of the necessary scope of work and tasks to be performed?
As far as we can tell, they have all the scope of work, and they have the price for it.
Okay, thank you.
Director Natoli.
Yes, just a brief question. Maybe staff can answer this. So in the information presented by Kiewit representative, he put the chart up there. That's on page 11 of 18, Exhibit C. And then I turned to the Balfour Beatty, and on page Exhibit A, page 10 of 20. And so they both list for electrical and instrumentation, Helix. One is more specific, as the gentleman from Kiewit spoke out. But the package for the bid submittal by Kiewit showed a $62 million number under that, but for Balfour Beatty it was $64 million. I can't tell if that's 800,000. Looks like 800,000. So how is it? And maybe the answer was answered just a moment ago, that for the same work using the same subs and the same contractor, unless the explanation about work performed by the Prime, that you could have a $2 million, almost $800,000 difference. And maybe I've answered the question.
Yeah, Vic just answered the question. It all depends on what the Prime contractor wants the subcontractor put in the scope. And we would have no way knowing exactly what it is, and Vic just answered that question.
Okay, so in the case of Balfour Beatty, then they were asking more work
more work to be done.
To be done by Helix or by the sub under the instrumentation.
Or the only logical conclusion that, well, I shouldn't say the only logical, other conclusion I could draw is that the Helix may be quoting different prices to different folks. Which I don't think it is illegal.
Yeah.
But I mean, I have not known that people would do that. But
okay. Yeah. Well, and I guess what just triggered the question more so than anything else is that we have the apparent low bidder, and obviously we had the protest comments here and so forth. And I guess I would just say, from this board member's purposes, and we'll get into deliberations, but expectation is that when people submit a bid, they submit it not only in good faith, but with the expectation they're going to meet that amount, and that it'll be done timely, and that's what they're going to do the work for, is for that amount. So.
Thank you. That's all I have no more questions of the board, so we are at the point of deliberation, and Director Hume.
Thank you, Chair. I apologize to legal counsel. I didn't give you a heads up that I might blow your hair back during council deliberations here, but I agree with staff's recommendation.
Thank you.
And
you had me worried there for a minute.
I know. Well, because this has come up on every big contract award that we've done for this project, and not without merit. I mean, these are large contracts. They are substantial scopes of work, and as was mentioned, they are scarce in the region for what it means to the bottom line of these companies. So they do take it seriously. It is worth it to make the effort to try and persuade that a bid ought to be disallowed. However, I think some days you're the bird and some days you're the statue. And Dragados survived a bid protest on a previous contract, and I just don't see that this protest meets the threshold, given council's understanding and the fact that staff feels comfortable that the low bid is warranted. So when you're talking about a $57 million difference, I couldn't sit up here in good conscience and overlook that without some pretty sound reasoning, and I haven't heard that sound reasoning. So I am in favor of standing by staff's recommendation for the award.
I'll second.
Let's wait. Director Harris?
Thank you, Chair. Lisa, I'd like to ask you, do you think if the bid is awarded to the low bidder, do you have any sense about pending litigation?
Well, that's certainly not up to us as to whether or not there would be litigation, but I feel confident that we would be able to defend the award.
It's very
like
defensible.
I said, there's strong judicial deference to the awarding authority and their decision. And in this case, I think the legal issues are pretty straightforward, and I think there's significant case law and statutory authority on our side. So I would feel confident.
Very good. Well, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move staff recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Harris, second by Director Hume. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you, everybody. Clerk, call the next item, please.
Acting as Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District and Sacramento Area Sewer District, District Separate Matters, item number 10, miscellaneous director and district engineer matters.
Just a couple of quick notes. We won't have a board meeting on April 25th, but we will have 2 board meetings in May and 1 in June. The Echo Water Project quarterly report is included in the package. Usually there's a presentation with it, but given that we have this contested award, that we put it as a receive and file. If any of the board members have any questions that would like to ask Vic, he's here. He can answer those questions. If not, Vic will bring back his show 3 months from now on that one. And then with that,
we appreciate your efficiency. That's it?
That's it.
Next item. Or are there any questions, I should say? No. Okay. Next item, please.
Okay. Acting as Sacramento Area Sewer District, your district consent matters are items 11 through 13.
Any questions?
I'll move consent.
Second.
Well, hang on, we have Director Natoli.
Yeah, a quick question on item 11. Is there any work in the roadway with that pump station?
It's not, but I'm going to ask.
No, there is no.
No, it's all within a confined.
It's confined. Okay, guys, I want to be clear about that because that section of road is not going to win any awards for best pavement surface in the county. So, okay, all right, thanks.
Okay, we have a motion to approve consent by Director Hume, I believe, and somewhere's a second. Director Bruins. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Everything else is a receive and file, so we're adjourned.